more registrations this year than last year, and over the highest number of unique players that we've ever had in the last 10 years for League. So with that, which is amazing, we've had a lot of questions come into our office about how the NTRP system works. You guys. And then also I wanted to thank Rob Scott, who's here. He's the Executive Director of the Intermountain section, and he flew in today. So let me introduce Heather Hawks to you. She is the Senior Manager of Product and Events. Some questions after. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Heather Hawks.
Everybody. Thanks so much for coming. I just want to tell everybody how exciting this is. This is the first time we've ever done a direct-to-player NTRP session. We've done a couple of webinars and phone calls, but to do it in person for me is a really exciting opportunity. I'm really passionate about the NTRP and the League program, so I really appreciate everybody's time and everyone coming out. Just so I can get a little bit of sense of who's in the audience, are there any captains in the audience? Awesome. Any coordinators or higher level administrators? And then players who don't captain but play. Okay, and then if you've been in USTA leagues for more than 3 years. Okay, awesome. This is good. This is really good. So I gotta get my flow. This is a little different than I envisioned it without my clicker. So there's me learning how to play tennis. This picture is a few months old. I picked up my first racket after 12 years with the USTA. That's pretty good, right? So Lori told you a little bit about my background. I started with a company called the Active Network. Some of you may have seen their logo on Tennis Link. I started with them 12 years ago. I was their manager of product development, and then I quit to go back to college, and on my last day, on my way out the door, they said, wait, we just signed a deal with USTA. Do you want to do tech support? And I was like, yeah, that sounds good. And now so that was 11 years with Tennis Link through Active, and then, as Lori said, came to National. I got involved with the NTRP about 5 years ago. I specialized in it as a product by choice on the Tennis Link team side of things because I found it really fascinating. The questions were fascinating, but the algorithm itself, as a, the math side of my brain was very interesting to me. So I got involved with a national oversight group. It's a committee called NOG. And they oversee the algorithm, and I started attending their meetings and getting really engaged in their processes and starting to understand the NTRP. What I found in the year and a half at National, to be completely honest, is that there's a gap. Because what we found was that the more information we gave players over the years, the more they used it, to be honest, sometimes to a disadvantage, because they would manipulate a little bit. So what happened over the course of time was that we pulled back what we were giving from the national standpoint, but now there's a disconnect with the player base who uses the NTRP, and when they play league tennis, lives and breathes by the NTRP. So I have worked with our marketing team. You will start to see more information about the NTRP. You'll see updates to our FAQs, and you'll see more of this. Player-facing time, we want to answer questions that we can. That being said, it is a proprietary algorithm, and there will be questions that I cannot answer because of that. And that's a little bit about what to expect from this workshop. My goal tonight is to educate and to answer, as I said, as many questions as possible. That's what I want to do. What I don't want to do is answer questions about individual players or individual cases. Just a brief little bit about the history because it started in Salt Lake City, for those of you that don't know that. Many years ago, about 30 years ago, the USPTA and the USTA got together and developed player rating bands to support the league system. And a gentleman named Larry Jones, who's a mathematician and a very, very avid tennis fanatic, got in his little mental cave and came up with the algorithm that we now know as the NTRP. And I had the pleasure of speaking at Larry's service this year because he passed away in July. And it was so funny to meet his family because they said, well, he just told us that he wrote a computer program that the USTA uses sometimes. So he was extremely modest about what he did for the USTA. His family was flabbergasted to learn what he has contributed to tennis over the years. What the adult NTRP does, it uses play history and current match results to generate player dynamic and year-end ratings. It effectively assigns player levels after only a few matches. We'll talk a little bit about that more in bits and pieces, but that few matches is important. And it becomes more accurate with more match results. As any averaging algorithm will tell you, the more information it has to work with, the more accurate the output of the algorithm. What it does not do, it does not identify tanking or other forms of score manipulation. I get this question all the time. The computer has no way to know whether or not a player lost a match on purpose. It does not change dramatically. So what you won't see are very large jumps. You may go up a level or down a level, but you don't see multiple level jumps. And we don't publish more than once a year. I'll talk about that as well. What is a dynamic rating? So this is a rating that stays behind the scenes, if you will. It's something that we see at an administrative level, but that is not published, that tells us about what's going on the court on a daily basis. So we run an algorithm, a calculation every night. It pulls in any results that were entered in the system that day, and it calculates on any player whose results were entered. How are they generated? You generate a dynamic rating if you play against another player with a rating. If you are a self-rated player and you play against another self-rated player, you do not generate a dynamic rating because we don't know anything about you. How does a player generate a year-end rating? They need to play at least 3 matches. So even though we won't use player results if you're against a self-rated player for dynamics, we will use them for a year-end if you only have 3 matches, if that's all we have to use. The year-end algorithm is different than the dynamic algorithm, which is why we can do that. That's it. That's the difference. So the dynamic is meant to show exactly what's going on the court. The year-end is to show what happened all year and what we learned about you that year. The reason we have dynamic ratings is because, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but because of promotions and DQs. It also helps us with appeals. We get a lot of those, and we use the dynamic to determine what we're going to do, whether or not an appeal should be granted. When do ratings expire? Computer ratings expire after 3 years. Self-ratings, if no computer rating is generated, expire after 2 years. And for the 65 and over players, their ratings will expire after 2 years if they're not continuing to generate a rating. How do players move up or down? This is a really complicated answer. But the easy answer is whether or not a player moves up or down is based on their performance relative to the players against which they are playing. So if a player is at let's say a 3-0, and they decide to play a 3-5 league because they want to move up, so they're going to play 3-5 players and hopefully bump their rating, the computer's going to say, I don't think you're going to do very well against 3-5 players, and they may not. And when they don't, the computer's going to say you're exactly where you should be at 3-0. So there isn't really a way to force that up or down as easily as it may seem, because it's all relative. Down is a little bit harder because you really have to show that you're not performing well at your current level for a very long period of time, because we know that tennis is so variable and we don't like to drop players. Why don't doubles partners move up and down together? If doubles partners are both self-rated and they always play every single match together, and neither player has any other results in the system, they will have the same rating. If a player has a rating when they start the season, meaning you were computer rated at the end of 1 year and now you're playing a new season, and your partner's self-rated, you're not going to have the same rating because the system knows that you have a history, and it knows about that history, and it's going to consider that when it factors in your algorithm. But it does not know what happens on the court. So a lot of times we get the question of, well, my partner was so much better than me and they carried all the matches. Why did my rating go up at all? The computer has no way of knowing that one player was the one that carried all the matches. It just knows that that's what happened. But you don't typically see partners have the exact same rating in the outcome of a season or a year. Which of my USTA player results are included? This is variable by section. If you're playing a straight league, adult league, your results are included. But mixed league, combo league, tri-level, up to the section to opt in or out. Tournament results for NTRP tournaments or all adult tournament play, also up to the section to opt in or out. I can tell you Intermountain does opt in for NTRP tournaments, I can tell you that. Yes. So DQs, let's talk about DQs for a minute. Who cannot be DQ'd? A computer-rated player cannot be DQ'd. We work very hard on making sure that that computer rating that comes out at the end of the year is one that we stand behind, and that rating will hold. No matter what happens on the court once you have that computer rating, no matter what you're generating with your dynamics, you are not going to be disqualified. Mixed players can be. Players who self-rate can be disqualified or promoted. The difference between a disqualification and a promotion is that you are promoted if you're already playing up on a higher level team. So if you self-rate as a 3-0 and you join a 3-5 team and you generate dynamics that indicate your skill level is much higher than where you are as a 3-0, we call that a promotion. We say stay where you are, but know that you've now been moved to a 3-5 level. If you're registered on a 3-0 team and you're generating dynamics that show that you are much higher than that 3-0 level, then you will be asked to leave that team and move on to a 3-5 team. 3 strikes equals a disqualification. So a strike is, we have what I'll call a strike zone. So if you're generating dynamics that are in that strike zone for a given level, and they're all different, right? So I can't tell you what they are, but what I can tell you is that we pay attention to where if you're a 2-5, you're going to learn a lot faster and you're going to get better faster. So the strike zone looks a little bit different than it does for players at different levels. These strike zones are something that we continually monitor with NOG, and we're always looking at them with data to say, have we hit the right spot with these DQs? Who's being DQ'd? Who isn't being DQ'd? Are we getting the right players? This is an ongoing conversation. DQs are a really, really challenging aspect of league tennis. They're challenging for me emotionally because I get my heartstrings tugged when I hear about players who get disqualified and don't want to be. Many players don't want to be. But then you hear the other side of the story where some of the teams may be relieved that a player's been DQ'd because they were having damaging effects on the nature of the game because of the fact that they were playing out of level. So this continues to be a really touchy subject, but it's an important one. When do they occur? Again, they occur when a player is out of level. I've gotten a lot of emails that say my coordinator gave me a strike and I shouldn't have gotten one. The computer generates a strike. You cannot change that. No coordinator can generate a strike and no one can undo it. Once you generate a rating that indicates, a dynamic rating that indicates you are playing way out of level, that nothing can be done about that. We'll look at it. We're happy to look at them. We get requests to look at them all the time, but it's not like an appeal. It's not something that can be changed. Strikes cannot be erased or appealed. No notification. So what this means is we've had conversations about should we tell players they're going to strike out? No, because then they're going to not play to the best of their ability so that they don't strike out, and that defeats the purpose. So we have to be really careful about that. What happens to a player's matches when they are DQ'd? This is, again, it goes back to section policy. They can reverse results or they can simply remove them. Appeals. So there's 3 types of appeals. Automatic appeals. Here is my admonition about the automatic appeals. There is, when you're logged in and you're looking in the upper right-hand corner of your profile in TennisLink, there's a little appeal rating button. And a lot of players want to know if they're eligible. They want to know how close to the line they are. So they'll click that button and they'll find out that they were close enough to the line to appeal, but they wish they hadn't. So they email or they call and they say, you have to undo my appeal because I didn't want to actually appeal. And it's actually a rule that we can't undo that appeal. We don't have a technical way to do it. I'd have to call a developer anyway, but it's actually a regulation that we can't undo that appeal. So very careful to advise players not to test the appeal button because it cannot be undone.
But it also can appeal down.
You can appeal up or down.
Some A's on people that were up and then went down.
Yeah, you can appeal. If you're eligible, so there's eligibility criteria that the computer looks at. The automatic appeals are all done by computer. The computer has a table that it looks at and says, who's trying to appeal? What do I know about them? Are they eligible for appeal up? Are they eligible for appeal down? And the computer makes a decision. Medical appeals. The Medical Appeal Committee is a very hard-working committee. I've seen them get files this thick on players seeking medical appeal. It's really very important that people who apply for a medical appeal are people who meet the criteria. That's something that can be done via your section. They will help you do that. They do get granted, not all the time. But the other thing is that a doctor's note that says this patient should be a 3.5 instead of a 4.0 is not enough to appeal. You'd be amazed how many of those we get. And then a NOG appeal. So I talked about the National Oversight Group, what we do. We meet every couple of weeks. We get appeals. We get players who say, I get it, I'm a 3-5, but I'm not a 3-5, and here's why. And the coordinator reviews that appeal with the player. There's a process specific to the section. That appeal goes through the section, and if the section agrees, it's passed on to national, and we review the case, and we take a look, and we say, yep, I see why. Sometimes those are easy decisions, and sometimes those are very difficult decisions. We approve about half, a little more than half right now. So some of the myths about the NTRP, we already covered this one. All of my USTA results are included. Not necessarily true. My win-loss record determines my rating. I won all my matches. Why didn't I go up? This goes back to that relativity conversation. You won all your matches, but we knew you were going to win all your matches because you were rated just a little bit higher on the back end than all the players that you played. You had no way to know that, but the computer knew that. And so it says you're right where you belong because you did just what we thought you were going to do when you got out on the court. All of my matches should be competitive since we are all playing at the same NTRP level. Not necessarily. This is what a 3.5 player means. Each player rating level has 50 ratings in it. So if you're a 3.5 player, your rating is anywhere from 3.01 to 3.50. This is a pretty wide breadth, and especially in the 3.5 range, which is our highest concentration of players. So if you're a 3.01 and you're playing a 3.35, you're gonna have a good match. You are compatible. You should have a decent match. But it may not be as intense as you would have hoped just because you're both 3.5s. Does that make sense? Yeah, this is a hard one because this is where everybody wants to know that magic number in the hundreds, and that's where it would all fall apart, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. My self-rating is factored into my dynamic and year-end ratings. So when you self-rate, when you complete the self-rate questionnaire, it spits out a recommendation, and you can choose to go higher. You can't choose to go lower, and that's kind of where it leaves you. It says this is where we think you should be playing. That is all that it does. It puts you in where it thinks the right bracket is for you based on the way you've answered the questions during registration validation. So if you self-rate as a 3.5, that's it. You're registering in that range or for teams that allow 3.5 rated players, right? But it doesn't do anything else. It's not a number that stays attached to you. The computer completely ignores anything about that 3.5 once you've registered. And everything that you do after that on the court is what actually determines your rating. Other websites provide more detail on NTRP ratings. This was not really ever much of a hot topic until about 4 months ago. It's become a really big part of my job. I have another slide where I'm going to talk about the others, but the fact of the matter is that they do not have our algorithm, and the USTA is the only source for NTRP rating information. Tennisrecord.com. So this is the one that has really made it a hot topic, and here's what I can tell you. We get a lot of questions about this site in particular because what they have done, and I was speaking to Lori about it earlier, one of the questions is how do they know who our players are? Because they're sending emails right to them. And what I think they've done is gone to a third party and purchased some kind of email list because they have not hacked our system. We've had developers all over it. It's not somebody on the inside. Not everybody in the league program is getting them. Maybe players outside of our league program are getting them. We don't have that visibility, so we're not sure. But they make it look like they're affiliated with the USTA. They have removed their NTRP branding at our request, but they don't have our algorithm. And what I can tell you is that they are not right. Sometimes they're close, but I've had a lot of, I talked about those heartstrings. I've had some really sad stories this year where players have said my captain won't play me, I'm a 4.01 on a 4.5 team, and now I'm just sitting on the sidelines and I'm thinking, how did you know you're a 4.01? And so through the conversation I find out they're using tennis records. This particular player was she was a 4.38. She wasn't even close to a 401, and here she was sitting on the sidelines of her team because her captain thought she belonged there because this outside website said she was a 401. So that's where we need to be really careful about that rating in the hundreds. First of all, they're not accurate. We don't publish them, so they're not accurate. But the second piece is that's not the nature of the league program, right? It's hard not to be competitive because it's competitive tennis, but it's really important to remember about what the purpose of the program is, right? It's community, it's camaraderie, it's love of the game, love of the sport, sportsmanship, and it's so easy to forget that. And I can, obviously I could get on a really big soapbox about this, maybe I will later on, but this is a big one, and here's what I will say, 2 things. Spread the word. Tell them you're unhappy. They've misrepresented what they can provide because it's inaccurate. The other thing is you can opt out at the bottom of their emails if you want to do that. I know a lot of people stay opted in just because they're curious, which is fine. They came out with some new features this week. But it's up to you, but I do recommend letting them know that you're displeased with what they've done and letting other people know that even though it looks like they're accurate, they are not accurate. Tennis League Analytics and Tennis League Stats. So Tennis League Analytics is basically just taking stats and standings information and aggregating it in a different way. We've kind of taken some learnings from that, to be quite honest, and said, well, if players are really jiving with that, that's probably something we should do. So it's not information that they shouldn't have, it's just the way they're presenting it to the captain. So we're taking a look at that a little bit. Tennis League Stats is very similar. I'm not as familiar with that one, simply because I don't have to be. The ones that give me the headache are the ones I know the best. Computer ratings, Kevin Schmidt. So this is a gentleman who has a variety of computer rating platforms for a variety of sports. And he has, some NTRP stuff up there and FAQ, and he does an okay job, but again, he doesn't have the algorithm. So what these individuals did, they were math folks, or they worked with math folks to take as much information as they could gather and do what's called reverse engineering. So they took as much as they could figure out and sort of backwards figured out the algorithm, but they didn't figure out the algorithm, they just think they did. So, and a lot of these websites charge money. So it's a little bit heartbreaking that players are spending money and engaging with these websites where they think they're getting information about their rating to the 100th and possibly manipulating what happens on the court as a result of that, when in fact it's not accurate information. This one's a little more complicated. So UTR is, who's familiar with UTR? Show of hands. A few of you. Okay, good. So then it won't be as complicated because some of you aren't as familiar with it. UTR is the International Tennis Rating Program, Universal Tennis Ratings, that's used by college recruiters, and it's used very heavily in the competitive junior space. They, earlier this year, said they were going to start producing ratings for adults. They're still doing that, they're just not promoting it at our request. We work very closely with them. They do some really excellent rating work. They're not going to replace the NTRP, and they are existing in their space while we exist in ours. We're currently, like I said, working together and talking a lot, and I really like what they do, but just make sure that people know. We have had, grievances or appeals submitted with UTR as the justification. It's a separate program, it's a separate algorithm. That's not justification for an NTRP grievance or appeal. These were some of the local questions that I got in preparation for today. What is the relationship between tennis records? So I talked about that. There is no relationship. And one of the things, at the end of the presentation, I'm going to share my email. As these sites become more engaged with players and share more about what they're doing and what they're working on, if you find things that seem really troubling to you, for example, they use the term NTRP or USTA or our brand or our logo, please feel free to send that my way, because that helps us keep out in front of what they're doing. Do local districts define ratings differently? This is a really good question, because the essence of this question is we hear that a 3.5 in our area is more like a 4.0 in another area. This is the geographical phenomenon that happens with ratings. Because you are where you play, And most of these regions that are very heavy tennis don't have a lot of overlap with outside regions, so the rating becomes a little bit localized. This is a problem that every rating platform has. I talked to all of them about this and a couple of other things because we want to fix it, right? It's a challenge. It's just a limitation of math. It says you're all playing each other, you're all generating those ratings in your area. In some areas, the ratings are higher, in some areas, they're lower. We do work very hard to be aware of where they are and the impact they're having on ratings. We do that by visiting sites, we do that by watching national championships, we do that by paying attention with administrators who've been in the business of NTRP for a long time and are close to a particular area. And we keep it on our radar and we just keep looking at it and we keep discussing it because we need to make sure we're doing the best we can. What I can tell you is that the variability is not extreme. In some cases you can see it, but it is not levels different. It's just, yeah, you're right, that's a strong tennis area, so those 3 5s are really good. Describe the difference in points between a 3.5 and a 4.0. So one of the things that Lori did was print out our level descriptions because I thought this would really help people take that with them. One of the discussion points that came out of it though was, well, why do we do self-rating? Why don't we just give players the characteristics and let them pick where they belong? And we tried that a long time ago, long before my time. And I didn't know that, so when I started, I was like so smart, and I said, oh my gosh, Nog, why don't we just like have them pick where they belong? The descriptions are right there. And I was really fortunate because they let me come back, but they were like, no, not even close, like levels and levels off. You know, some players low, some players high, it's just not even close. But those level descriptions are important because if you're familiar with the description of the level, they'll help you know if you're tracking and if you feel like you're in the right place, so it does help. So those will be available before we go tonight if you want a description of the level. But you know, between a 3.5 and a 4.0, the 3 top differences would be consistency, variety of stroke, and with the 4.0, they're going to have much more directional control over where that ball goes than a 3.5. We are also working on coming out with some NTRP videos. They're up between 30 seconds and a minute each. And what we did was take a male and a female of each from each level and brought them to the campus, and we filmed them for about 15 minutes, and we're shrinking it down to about 30 seconds to a minute. This is not meant to determine a self-rating. It's not meant to issue, to be grounds for an appeal, but what it is meant to do is give you a visual of what that player really looks like on the court. This was an amazing activity. I had so much fun doing this because to see the levels playing back to back, it just solidified why these levels work so nicely in structuring our league program. Is it consistent across all sections that players 65 and over have NTRP ratings that never change? This regulation actually changed 2 years ago. Players 65 and over publish as the year-end rating algorithm calculates them. So if they go up or down, they do change. They have the ability to appeal. So there's no limit on those appeals. So we talked about that table and knowing if they're 65 and over, they're allowed to appeal, which means they're subject to a DQ. So that's how we're managing the 65 and over eligibility and rating changes right now. We are looking at that. There may be some more changes, but for now, that's what the rule is. Is there a strategy to play for what you want to move up? So we talked about this, and this goes back to not knowing anything about your opponents. If you're a 3.25, that means you're published at a 3.5. You want to be a 4.0. And all of your matches happen to be against players who are in the 3.0 to 3.20 range. And you win them all. You're in the right place, right? So it depends a lot on who you're playing against and the outcome of those matches. There isn't a way to force your rating higher other than indicating that that is your skill set on the court. Yeah?
Do tournaments make a difference over league when it comes to going up and down?
No, tournaments are included. in the case of,
Do they weight the same?
they're weighted the same, yep. And with the exception of championship matches, all of your matches are weighted the same.
What constitutes championship match? Sisters and Beyonders? Is that fine?
How did you stump me with that? No,
His
Local.
championship and the computer is anything past the district's on.
flight and on.
District's flight and on. So it doesn't matter if it's districts because everything goes from top down. So the player you played goes to nationals, everything goes from the top down, right? So how they did by the end of the season goes down to you if you played them districts. If they did well nationals, that would bump your dynamic down, is that right?
It could. It may not necessarily. Yeah. So basically, what that means is it's a process called benchmarking, and what it is we take the players that we know, which is those national players, and it rolls. And I call it the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon because that's what everybody gets. I go, oh, okay, I get it. Because by the time we run that through, everybody has, in some form or fashion, touched a player that participated in a national championship. But the weighting of the matches specifically is the district and beyond.
Those are way more than tournaments.
Yes.
Those are weighted higher.
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Going back to describe the difference in points, in the same way you have that illustration, the 3-0 to a 3-5, are there more points in between a 3-5 and a 4-0, or is it the same
Same.
distance?
So a 3.5 to a 4.0 would be 3.51 to 4.00. Yeah. Yes.
Are singles matches weighted heavier than doubles?
No. Yes.
The benchmarking is not just if you participate in the championship level events, it's if you're on that team. You don't even have to play matches to get benchmark tagged. They don't call it benchmarking anymore. Now they limit your ability to appeal down. That is effectively what
But
benchmarking is.
there's no way to tell if you did that.
The term's gone.
Well, they used to. Okay, so yeah, we used to publish benchmark ratings.
Used to have
Yep.
E next to your
Yes.
name,
Yep.
and C, yep.
Yep.
Like 3 years ago, we did change.
Yep, we did change the benchmarking process a little bit in conjunction with that. The only limitation to appealing is a national benchmark. That's the only limitation.
But my question is, my comment is, you don't have to play at that event, you have to be a member of that team.
You know what, I actually have to check that.
If you have two players, like you mentioned earlier, that are exactly the same and they play doubles together and they've only played together with no one else, so the computer gives them the same rating. But then they go off and play singles. And now the computer realized that one was actually really stronger than the other. Does the computer go back retroactively and change the rating? Because they would have had say a 3.25 average rating. And so once the computer finds out they're a lot better, because they've already got that average, it doesn't pull them right up to where they should have been.
No, it doesn't use the average the way you just described. That's not how it uses the average on the doubles calculation, and it doesn't reverse calculate.
It doesn't reverse calculate.
Not for that. Nope. Yeah.
So you said if two self-rated players are playing against each other, then it doesn't use that rating. It does. So if you're playing doubles and two of the players are self-rated on opposite sides of the team, does that match not count at all for all players?
Correct. So the match
Or
counts.
it only counts for the computer-rated players?
It doesn't. So the match counts, meaning it counts. You played the
I mean,
match.
on the rating.
But it doesn't calculate a dynamic rating for that match. Because ratings, think about this, ratings are relative, meaning we only know about what happened on the court relative to the other players that were on the court with you. And if we say we don't know anything about those players because they were self-rated, we can't hang our hat on anything because we just don't know enough about them. Does that make sense? So yes, that's a great question. 4 players, 2 of them are self-rated on opposite teams, no one gets a dynamic.
So even after the 3 matches that you say that they have to have in order to generate a year-round rating, once they have those 3 matches, that doesn't go into consideration?
No, so once you have to have 4, you have to have 4 matches against a rated player to generate a dynamic. Even if you've started generating dynamics and you play a self-rated player or in a partnership where one of the players is self-rated, you do not generate a dynamic.
I remember, maybe it was 3 years ago, but it could have been 5, I'm not sure. Answering a survey that I was invited to take by USTA, and one of the questions had to do with if we had an option to look at our points, dynamic rating, the actual dynamic rating, would we want that? Or, and speaking on behalf of your team, would you want that? Whatever happened to that?
That's a good question. We know that players want to see their ratings. We know that. I mean, there's absolutely nothing to dispute that. The thing that holds us back is, from an administrative perspective, the bulk of the time and energy, unfortunately, is spent dealing with the players who navigate that aspect of the system. They're cheating, they're tanking, they're lying on their self-rate questionnaire, and these players create a lot of work. They also affect other players. When you tank a match, so you can keep your rating where it is, your opponent's rating is affected. We have DQs all the time where the player goes, I have no business winning against this guy. Look at the results. And there's nothing you can do because there's no way to prove that a player lost on purpose. So we know that the more players know, the more we increase the likelihood of manipulation. I will tell you more than ever, this is the hot topic. We have to figure out, is the cost of that belief or understanding worth the satisfaction of the players that will then have their rating in hundreds? I will tell you that the young lady whose captain thought she was a 4.01 would not tell you it's worth the cost because she lost her season. She couldn't play. That's a sad story. Next year she wouldn't even be recruited. So we have to think all of that through before we say we know you want it, here it is. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
I guess my other question is if people are, I'm just curious if people are paying attention to this tennisrecord.com because they've become much more proactive. Does the inaccuracy go both ways?
Go up and down, you mean?
No.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, some folks are higher on Tennis Record than they are in NTRP, and some folks are lower. It is.
Well, that's why Tennis Record is so, it's gotten so much traction, because it's like crack. You just want to go there and see what's happening.
And they're full time. I mean, they're on it. Yeah. Yes.
Does the computer move you down if you hit 1/100th below your level? Is it automatically going to move you down, or is there some different algorithm that doesn't move you down until you're much further lower than that?
Oh, that's a good question. So yeah, it moves you down. So if you're a 403, you're published as a 4.5, you've been playing as a 4.5, you did not have a good season at all, and you calculate at year end as a 399, you will publish as a 4.0. So it is literally that line.
Every single section is the same? It's not
Every
different?
section is the
If
same.
you're 1/100th below, the main computer moves you down.
Yep, and the computer does all the work. With the calculations, the computer does that work. The only exception is when a manual appeal is granted, and that's those medical and those NOG appeals. Everything else the computer does.
But theoretically, throughout the year, you could have been a 4.02, 3.9. You could have been hovering.
Sure.
It's not until the end of the year that where it is at that moment.
Yep.
I have a question about the percentage, getting back to this, debate. What percentage of players do you think are gaming the system if they have an opportunity to do so?
No.
It's certainly a minority. It's just a few, or is it? It's like, no, you'd be surprised. It's really more than we'd want to see.
That's a good question, and actually I would turn that one back to the players, because players who you all would know better as players how often you feel there's a player or a team that is tanking. I know that these are the cases that I hear about the most, so it's very difficult for me to comment on, because when the NTRP is working beautifully and everybody had a great season, nobody bothers to send an email, right? It's when something is not working, and so it's sort of like my perspective on that
You're
isn't
seeing
clear.
the problems.
Yes. What I will say, and the new sites that are out are all part of this, is that we've had coordinators this year say more than ever, more than ever. You know, making up fake names, self-rating multiple times, tanking matches. Players do go to the extreme. They are the minority. They will ruin an entire league if you have a team of enough of them with the same
One last
philosophy.
question. Do most people want to move up? Or at the end of the year, are they just praying rights and over and saying, oh, I don't want to go up? Or are they like, oh, I want to go up? What?
That's a great question. So here's the absolute truth. The absolute truth. There's no universality. What I will tell you, this is just experience speaking. Males like to stay where they are. Females would like to go up. That's it.
Do you have like other indicators besides just your NTRP that move you up? Because like we had players that were, I don't know, like 3, 2, 5, say, and we went to nationals and then they got moved up. So I mean, is the rating against national teams that much higher that it's just going to move them all up to 4-0?
Could have been. Yeah. You see ratings at nationals, and this goes back to that geographical thing. You'll see ratings at nationals for the same level, typically quite close. So even though they, say they're all 3, 2, 5, just because a team made it to nationals doesn't mean they're all really high up in their level. You really do see some good compatibility there. But yeah, if they did really well against teams that were high rated, then
But is it true that if you win one game at nationals, you're probably going to move up?
no.
I mean, not one game, one set, not one match.
Nope. There's no consistency. We have in that aspect. Yes.
I just have like a two-part question. So does mixed league, I know it has its own rating, but is mixed league factored into the year-end rating and your dynamic, or is it totally a separate rating? And then is there any age at which they say, after this age, your rating is your rating, if you've been rated there, say someone's been rated at the same place for 10 years, they're 55 years old. Are they just basically set there, or is there no age limit as to whether they can move up or down, or especially get moved up?
Yeah, so 2 questions. The first one is mixed. There we go.
Yeah.
Mixed is completely separate. It's completely separate algorithm. It's a separate calculation. It's a separate rating.
So it has nothing to do with your other league, has no factor whatsoever? So
Not
if
even
you're
a
national
single
on
year?
a mixed team, it has no factor on your other?
No,
None?
no. The NTRP, as I said earlier, has been around for a very long time, and through that long time, we've been able to learn a lot about how to improve that algorithm and how to make it better. When we first started doing doubles ratings, they were not as good as they are today. They are very good. UTR a couple years ago started to, or not even a year ago, started to work on doubles ratings, and they called me and they were like, this is a disaster. And I said, yeah, good luck. And call me in a year because you'll start to figure it out. It is very difficult. Mixed, still new. It has not been around, and it's very, very challenging because you've got the challenge of having players of different levels. So that's one challenge on the court together, because you talked about that. If you have a stronger player, they're going to likely carry, right? But then the other thing is the gender mix.
Well, so it's like 95 and 10, right?
Yes.
It's such a,
There's so much difference between the players.
Right.
Yes, it's very challenging.
and then the age thing, is there any age cutoff?
No, it's good with the computer. No one decides that.
So there's not like
computer.
a set age?
No, it used to be 65. It used to be that when you reached the age of 65, your rating did not change. And what we found was that very active players wanted their rating to reflect their activity. So the regulation came out and they said, we'll change it, but we'll let you appeal if you want. So, yes.
So just to understand, you are saying if you're playing women's league and you're playing mixed league, the mixed league will have nothing at all. It will not affect your rating at the end of the year. But if you're only playing mixed, then that's obviously how it figures out your rating.
Yep, and so you have an M rating, and that will allow you to register for an M league. If you stay in mixed, and so you have an M rating at your end, and then you go to register for a mixed league, you can use that rating. But if you go to register for an adult straight level league, you will be prompted to self-rate. And the computer, if you had a rating in the past and it expired and you self-rate, the computer will look back and say, now did the questions they answered put them higher than or at the same level as their previous rating. And if it's higher than, then you will get that higher. But if it's the same, then it looks at that previous rating unless that rating was a mixed rating. It does not, it doesn't look at that at all unless it has to because you're registering for mixed. Yes.
So if there's a 3-5 player who wants to keep 3-5 or move up, is it to their advantage or disadvantage to play with a 3-0 player as a partner?
I mean, I guess it depends on what happens on the court. The 3-0 is not going to pull them down, if that's what you're asking. You know, and the way the algorithm is designed, it knows that that's what happens on the court. So it has that factored in. So that 3-0 is not going to keep that 3-5 down if they play together. Yes?
I have a question. In some states, I'm going to just give an example, like maybe Texas, when I've gone to nationals. I've noticed that states that are larger and have a larger base of players, it seems to me that generally they are stronger than like, say, Utah that has a smaller base of players. And I'm wondering if that is because we're playing the same players over and over because there's just not that many of us, and maybe that's it. Or I'm wondering if they have so many players that they only get to play a player once or twice in a whole year when we're playing the same players 5 or 6 or 7 times. What do you think about that?
Well, it could be. It goes back to the geographical thing, though, but we also have geographical regions that are very isolated and really, really strong. So it really is kind of one of the, and it's different all the time. You do see, you know, patterns, but then one year, one team is awesome, and it's a geographical thing, right? We look at it and go, okay, this is why they're so high, but then the next year, they're not that strong. So it can change. But the bigger regions could have stronger teams, they've got more players.
Heather, can I?
Yeah.
I've got a thought, and I'm wondering if this is how I would understand it. So, for example, comparing us to Colorado. Okay, Colorado is 5 times the players as us. So that would assume if you had a team of 3-5 players, and there's 10 people on the team, in Utah you're going to have 2 that are 3-1s, 2 that are 3-2s, 2 that are 3-3s. So in our 3-5 team, we're only going to have 2 players at the highest level of 3-5. Whereas when they have 5 times the number of players, their 3-5 team should, if it's made it this far, be primarily consisted of 3-4-5 players. So really, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, if I'm going the wrong way. So really, a Utah team should never beat a Colorado team when they have 5 times the number of players at the highest level inside that NTRP. Would that make sense?
I mean, you don't see it at national. You do see a mix. I mean, you really do. What I will tell you is that if you look at Texas or Southern, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the way Southern breaks apart their leagues, but they have low leagues and regular leagues. So they break their 3-5 into a 2-5 and below, and then a 2-5 and above. The challenge of that is multifold. You've got to have more capacity, you've got to have more courts, you've got to have more administration, you've got to have more players. You also have to have enough players to run a 2-3, 2-5 league and under that don't want to advance. Because you can play all season, but you're not going to advance, right? So it really does depend on the player base that they're pulling from. Yes?
Does the computer recognize, does it do anything about whether you're playing lines 1, 2, or 3?
No.
There's no weighting there.
No.
It's really about who you're playing.
Yes. Yes.
What is the appeal range?
I can't tell you that. What was the question was what was the appeal range? It's a table that lives in the system, and I can't tell you what it is. It changes though. I mean, like I said, we look at it, we look at who's trying to appeal, who wants to appeal, how we think it's working, and it does get changed. And that's the good news. Yes.
Tournament-rated players that have a tee,
Yeah.
if they go to play on a regular adult league, they have to self-rate.
Correct.
Does the computer start them at their tournament rating, or does it start them at 0?
It's same as mixed. It treats them the same way. It just completely ignores that T. Yeah. Yes.
So if I'm understanding, if you're playing doubles, the computer has, each person has a rating. And somehow it's saying, okay, we expect this team to beat these 2 players, maybe 6-4. But if these players actually beat this team, is that what helps your rating to go up? I mean, is that?
Yep.
Okay, so there's an estimated of what they expect the outcome to be, and if the outcome's different, or even if you lose, but you're only expected to take 2 games, and maybe you take 4, that actually, even though you lost, it's still a good thing.
Yep, there are other factors in there, but you're on the right track. Yep, yes.
So I'm curious, so when you're able to appeal, does that line, if you want to appeal down or appeal up, does that line widen or narrow depending on how many 3-0s are at this level, how many
No.
3-5s they have here? And
Nope.
it doesn't change per year?
No, it doesn't change based on how many players are at a given level. It's based on other factors. How many matches you've had. And we say, okay, if you've had X number of matches and you're within X hundredths and you want to appeal, we won't let you. And now we have a meeting and we talk about it and we look at some data and we go, well, now we're going to let you because we think that makes a little more sense based on what we're seeing in the rating trends.
And
so
then
those are the kind of changes.
And then how long is the appeal window?
You can
how
appeal
long is that
anytime.
available?
You can appeal
Anytime
anytime.
during the year?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Do you have more slides, or are you done?
I think.
Jason, I asked her that a few minutes ago. I'm like, oh, is it okay to go to questions? Or?
No, this is it. No, we're good. No, we're good. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
So if you want to do the appeal button, and you wait until all of the league plays over this year, it's not going to mess up any of your record from what you've already done.
Correct. Yeah. So the question was, if you
Want
appeal
to
after
appeal?
you're done playing,
Yeah.
you're fine, and it doesn't change your year end. So you could play a 3-0 all season and see where you are on the line, and appeal up to a 3-5 or appeal down to a 2-5. You're fine. You're not going to play anymore. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Good question.
So, does playing in like a 40 and over league or 55 and over league, do the ratings associated in those leagues, are they weighted differently than if you're playing in the 18 and over league?
Nope.
Okay.
It's all the same. Yep.
Okay, so I read something, and I swear I found it on USTA, but I don't know if this is correct or not, that your dynamic rating takes into account 3 matches at a time. So say you do equal, equal, equal for 3 matches, and then you just stink it up. And then you go back up and you do equal, equal, equal. That the match that dropped, it's going to look at the matches around it, and that match that you didn't play as well is not going to do anything. It's not going to affect your dynamic rating.
We changed the way we did dynamics in the last couple of years, so I don't know. It's possible that you read something that was outdated, or we've changed it since that was published. I'm not sure, but we have. It used to be a little bit more like that. It's not like that anymore.
So now it's per match, per match, per match. Just
Yeah.
what it is.
And it's that 4. We went up to 4. Four matches against a rated player before you generate a dynamic, and then you keep going from
But
there.
after every match you play, your rating goes up again.
Yes. Yeah. Or stays the same.
Or stays.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So in the section in Utah, in our district, we changed to a 3rd set match tie break. So how is that 3rd match tie break calculated versus other sections that don't do the 3rd set tie break before they get to sectionals?
This is such a good question. I should have had that up there. I like this one. So the question was, how does the format? The question was, how does the format affect the weighting of the match? Currently, it does not. That is something I carry a torch about because I think it should. But
It's weighted the same as the full set.
yeah, they're all weighted the same. Yeah.
So say that again. So if you have a 3rd set tie break and it's 10-5, how is that?
It only shows where
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the format the match was. It does not matter. It treats them, but no results are weighted any more or less than you could have a 20-minute timed match, and it's going to weight it the same as a 2 out of 3 sets. It doesn't. The computer does not know.
But the 3rd set is a 1-0 score, so the
That's
computer
what I'm
thinks the score was 1-0. Yes.
Yes.
One game.
Counts as one game.
Yes.
It
Yes.
counts as a game, not a
Yes.
set.
So,
Sorry. Thank you.
so how is that the same as a different district that plays a 3rd set tie break, and that could be a 6-1 win or loss, or a 7-5 or 7-6. So how does the 1-0 convert to that, because that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
All of you guys.
I just want
It's
zero.
very important.
It's considered a game. The tie break is considered a game, and
No,
that's.
that's not what I'm asking.
But the one is very heavy.
But so in other districts, they play out a full third set, okay? So let's say someone, loses 6-1, or they win 7-6, but when we record the score, it's only recorded as 1-0. So how does the 1-0 have the same amount of weight as winning 6-1 in a different district?
These are two different numbers.
Because it's two different things.
Don't all districts
No.
play a third set?
No, I need to, you know what, I have to look at it because I'm seeing it in front of me and I'm like, I have to look at it. I have to look at it and see. It's not, format doesn't change the weighting, but I see what you're saying. In order for me to answer you, I want to look at it and figure out how I want to answer that question. Does that make sense? That's a good
So
question.
you're saying if I win 10-0 in a third set tiebreak, I only get one game?
Yes.
That's what but now I need to check. Because now I don't think that's the case. I misunderstood the question. Sorry, I caused a lot of havoc with that one.
Also, when you're talking about the score, when I run a tournament and people come up and they really want to tell me what the score of the tiebreak was, I honestly don't care because it's either 7-6 or 1-0. The score of the tiebreak is completely irrelevant.
just worth
It's
one
never
game.
even entered into the computer, in most of it.
The score, but it's just worth one
Yeah,
game.
it's one game. So I think, and I want to make sure everyone understood when you're talking about relativity. So again, you could lose every single match the whole year and your rating go up. Because if you lost every match 6-4 and the computer thought you should have lost it 6-0, you went up. So the score is what matters in every single match. And that's where I'm thinking your question.
Exactly.
It's still, it doesn't make any difference whether you lost the third set and there's no win-loss record. You just lost a game. That third set is just a game.
Yeah.
So a third set is only counted as a game, not as a set.
Correct. In our
You're
district.
not sure.
I want to look at it. No, she's right, but now it's I want to look at it.
Will you get back to her and let us know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I just want to comment on that. I think everyone plays at the same rule and in the same district, so we are getting rated at with the same system. So it really doesn't matter if we are 1-0 or 6-4, Because we are getting rated against people.
Oh, I see what
who are
you're
the
saying.
same
You're all
group.
using the same
So
rules, yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
it evens up.
Because they're all using the same rules. I'm gonna go to the back.
Two quick questions.
Yeah.
2008, 2009, you guys had a algorithmic correction, I guess would be the nicest way to describe it, where you moved 33% of the tennis playing population up. Can you give us a background as to the reason why?
Sure. So the algorithm, what we found in the algorithm, and actually I was still working on LinkedIn, that was prior to my NTRP engagement, but I do remember getting the emails. What they found the algorithm was doing was something called compressing, and it was pushing all the players towards the middle of the rating curve. So as you can imagine, there's a bell curve, as with any algorithm, and that curve peaks around 3.5, but what they found was way too many players were in that 3.5. So what they needed to do was better calibrate the ratings. So there was an alteration to the algorithm to better calculate those ratings and push those players back out of compression. Because otherwise we'd end up, if we had stayed on that course without recalibrating and addressing it algorithmically, every single player would eventually end up at 3.5. So
That begs the question, you're going to have another calculation adjustment? Naturally.
not this year.
But there will be one in the future.
We're not looking at it that way. So what we're doing right now, instead of doing, that by the way, was very, very difficult. So it was difficult for the administrators for a very long time. We don't ever want to go through that again. So what we're doing is looking at ongoing algorithmic adjustments that will better calibrate as we go so that we don't have to do that. What happened was people weren't looking for compression, and then they found it and they went, oh, we have to fix this. We are constantly looking every single year at year end, this is what we look for, so we know we don't have it. Yeah.
This last quick question. With
Yeah.
relative exception, very famous urban California captain who was banned for 10 years for using a player who was not actually the player on his registered team. As Lori and I have talked to Dan James several times, Dan James, former national head coach for wheelchair, would go back to see you guys and White Plains, and like gaming and stand going back with all of these complaints about these couple of different captains that are playing and gaming the rules. What's USTA's stance in terms of taking a captain who is blatantly and consistently playing against? I mean, because again, with that one exception of that around California person, we really don't hear about the captains that, quite frankly, should be rightfully punished. And I'm thinking most people in USDA would stand up and applaud and say, thank you. We appreciate the fact that you're looking out for our best interest and you're eliminating these people who take this just a little bit too over seriously and get a little overzealous and putting them in sort of a checkmate situation. It sounds like, you know, your earlier answer was, well, it's really hard and we don't really know. And, you know, is USTA really stepping forward, and no offense, shooting a couple hostages to sort of demonstrate to everybody else, this is not acceptable amongst the tennis community, and we as the progenitors of your tennis community, we are here to protect and make sure that captains like this or players like this don't job the system. Because I think a lot of what you're saying tonight in terms of not wanting to share information, and quite frankly, creating, not by your own desire, but sort of by your lack of informational give, is what makes tennis records so, I gotta know because USTA won't tell them.
Yep.
And yet USTA is not telling because they're afraid of people jobbing, but yet you're not really eliminating the people publicly. I mean, shaming them publicly and saying, look, you have forfeited your right to participate amongst good, hardworking, sportsman-like folks. You're gonna sit for 2 years, you're gonna sit for 10 years. What's USTA doing?
Are you talking about like Saturday?
Yes, but do that on all grounds. Like, if you're playing players that aren't their actual selves, absolutely fry them. But if you're saying that someone is just on a bad streak and should be
No, he's
somehow.
talking about people that are self-rating, or you that are.
I'm talking about people that end up self-rating for purposes, captains who have an over-preponderance of self-raters that always end up three-striking and getting out. I mean, things that are patterned and obvious. I'm not asking you to go out just arbitrarily. I'm just saying, and you probably have the names. You probably have people in your head.
Probably know who the bad captains are.
Oh, this fool again.
Yeah, and so it is, you know what, it is really difficult, and I don't say that as a cop-out. I say that because it is my day in and day out. And anybody who, and I haven't had the opportunity to work with any of you closely, except maybe Rob a little bit, you'll hear me say this all the time. I am all about accountability. The challenge is the evidence, right? Because it will always come down to a he said, she said. So, when we can provide evidence that they fabricated a name, that they did mislead the system by self-rating incorrectly, then absolutely. And I agree. There are different ways to handle poor behavior than how we handle it with the rules and regulations. This is how we feel at this point. This is the best way to do it, because otherwise, initially, the response is it's going to go very much the other direction, and you're going to have a little bit of chaos. And I think we're trying to keep things as intact as we are. I hear exactly what you're saying. I've said it before. If you're a local coordinator and you've got a bad behaving captain and you know that captain is behaving badly, get them out, right? But you know, it is a challenge. It will continue to come up, and all I can do is say, I hear what you're saying. It's a good question. Yeah.
I have a solution that would solve that whole problem.
Tell me.
Don't apply dynamic disqualification just to self-rated players. Apply it to all players. So I was just at Nationals, but everybody at Nationals at 3-5 level, everyone was 4-0, some were 4-5. If the dynamic disqualification applied to every player, even computer-rated players, those players would be disqualified and everything would be 3-5 or close to 3-5 level at Nationals. Why doesn't the USTA do that?
Let's not do that.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I'm in a knock meeting right now. So we used to, and we stopped. And one of the questions for next year is, are we going to start doing it again? So, you know, I don't make those decisions. Those are the policy decisions, and that is governed by committees. You're changing your target. I mean, DQs are really difficult. They really are. So it can go both ways. But I certainly see what you're saying. I do.
I sometimes wonder if a solution or support system maybe could be increased and also recruit more players if the pros that we're working with got involved more on some level. It used to be that, I think maybe self-rating took the place of you need to have a pro assess as you come on. But I guess my question is there an effort to involve a regulation that involves pros to be more privy to the rules and regulations and then therefore active in what happens in these matches?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say rules and regulations so much as NTRP. That's what I'm going to Denver for. We're working on a curriculum for the USPTA, and we're gonna go back to speaking a lot more to the levels of the NTRP and really educating them on what that means and why. So yes, absolutely, and I can actually put a check mark in that box because I'm getting on the thing tomorrow to go do it. So.
But the pros currently have no input to someone's rating.
No, you're right. They used to be, it was, you would go to a verifier clinic and you go play and they'd watch you and they'd tell you what your level was.
Right.
Now it's the self-rate, which is not perfect. It does an okay job.
But there still are verifiers there. I mean, they're writing stuff down. What do they do?
You were at one where we sent some folks out to watch the event. Yeah. They weren't verifiers. No, they weren't changing ratings. Verifiers would go and say, I just watched that player. I don't know, Rob used to be a verifier. I just watched that player. He should be this level. And they'd all sit around and go, do you think he should be that level? I think he should be that level. We don't do that anymore. We sent people, we're watching for compression, we're watching for accuracy of ratings. We sent verifiers to watch the event and take notes. They did not change ratings as a result of the notes. So I wondered if that was the event that you were at when you said that, because they did come back and say we found some stuff we gotta look at. So, yep.
Can
Yes.
we just set the number of self-rates on a team like to 2?
The challenge is in areas where there's a lot of growth or there's an initiative to bring a lot of new players in, you don't want to, you can't possibly have that many teams, right? So that's a challenge. We've talked about limiting self-rated players going to nationals, number of self-rated players on a team going to nationals. It comes up every year. We just haven't done it yet. Yes?
Hey, so my question is, I had the person asked me to ask this question. If you play an national age tournament that's not NTRP rated, does it affect your dynamic rating at all?
No.
Okay, so it doesn't matter who they play, his age group does not affect it. Second question is, does 3 games in a set constitute an even match for the computer?
That's what she said.
It doesn't. It doesn't look at it that way.
It doesn't constitute, they consider it to be an even match if you get at least 3 games in a set.
It doesn't matter to the algorithm whether the match was even or not.
No, I'm just saying, does it constitute your dynamic rating not adjusting significantly if you get at least 3 games? So that's a myth.
No, that's a myth. Yep. Yes.
So if I look at 3.0, what the 3.0 can do, can play, the skills, and I think, oh no, you know, I'm good at all this stuff. I'm actually a 5 player, but I'm ranked a 3.0 player, and yet I'm not winning because maybe my partner's not real strong. How do I move up to where I think I should be at the 3.5?
Play up and win.
I've done it up hard.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing, yeah, I mean, if you think, if a lot of people think they should be higher, that's the challenge. I don't know what to say. It does depend on who you're playing against too, and you can't control that.
The day the ratings come out is a day that our office needs to have a really big vacation because the number of crying women who thought they were moving up and didn't is really, really big every year. And the number of men who did everything they could to move down and didn't is always, you know, the ratings day is stressful in our office.
When is that?
What day is it? Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, this is good. So a couple things, yeah. Ratings come out on December 1st at midnight Eastern Standard Time. So that's when we push the button. It can take up to a few hours to actually complete the publishing, but that's when we start. So for those of you curious, midnight on December 1st, we average 2.2 million page hits on December 1st every year. So that is super exciting for the USTA. And before we wrap up with the 4 questions, I just want to touch on this slide. For anybody, we're almost done. Hang in there with me. For anybody who has TennisLink or USTA.com access issues, receives error messages, or has registration problems, this is who you want to contact. For membership renewal, purchase, and duplicate issues, that's who you want to contact. Your local coordinator can help with rules and regulations, grievances, and detailed ratings, inquiries, and appeals. I put my email address up here. I was advised that this was a pretty generous decision, and I said I'm okay with it. Because I'm sure that no one's going to send me personal questions or personal inquiries. Those have to go through the proper process and channels. But I do want you to know that USTA National is accessible. We are not a black box. We don't want to be a black box. If we don't have players, we don't have programs. I want to know what's working and what isn't. It is not all fixable overnight, but the more we know about it, the more we can do, and I want everybody to hear that we are an open door. So I didn't have every answer that everybody wanted. I didn't have all the details that everybody wanted the ability to give them, but I do want you to know that we are listening and that you have access to reach out to us, to share your experiences, your concerns, your thoughts, considerations, questions. That's the kind of stuff, the philosophy. Have you guys tried this? Have you thought of this? I heard this. Bring it on, because that's what gets me excited about coming every morning. Yes?
I have two questions. What happens when, for example, we were playing a match and the girl got sent by B, she's learned to be, and so we had to call the match. And what happens if you have a no-show, so a forfeit? And we record the score as like 6060, but does that go towards your rating?
No.
What happens, and then what happens when what if you're losing 2-4 and then the person gets sent by a B and then they retire?
It's a retirement. So retirements have certain rules about how you have to have played to a certain point. You have to have played a certain number. And then the retirement, I want to say this right, the retirement received gets credit, but the retirement, no. The retirement given, let me look at that one. I don't want to say that wrong because I could say it the opposite, but yeah, if it's a retirement and you've played to a certain level of points, then it does count. But it won't count to a DQ. Retirements won't count to a DQ.
You want to tell us what that level is?
I'll look if I can tell you. No, I'm not telling you. Yes.
Is there such a thing as trying to keep a certain number of 3-5s, 4-0s, 3-0s, whatever? Because it seems like some years there's like a mass exodus to a level, and other years there's nobody that moves. So why is that? I mean, is it literally that there's just that many people that year that are at the number to move up?
Yeah.
That seems so strange.
Yeah, this year, I'll tell you, this year.
Because last year there was like nada.
Way more level mobility up than there was last year. It's just, nothing's different. I mean, they're not done yet, but based on what has been done and what we've seen, we're just seeing more mobility this year. And it's because the players that were at nationals were higher than the players last year. Just
Okay, because you saw across the level, like December of last year, 11 months ago, it was like static, right? Okay, and that's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not that you're trying to keep different levels, a number of people within that level.
Nope.
Okay.
No, we don't look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the year-end ratings, those are calculated after nationals, correct?
Yes.
And so, whoever wins nationals, whatever team from whatever section, do you take their individual NTRPs and then if our team, like from our district, do well in those divisions, does that help our moving up or down ability? Like, do you adjust the algorithm based on who's winning at sectionals and how that trickles down to the local section?
We don't manually do it, the algorithm looks at that.
Okay.
So, a little bit, yes.
So we would be compared to the teams that are winning at nationals?
If you played them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's say we have, a 4-0 team that wins nationals, and they did well against the team that ended up winning. They didn't win, but they did well against the team, then that algorithm is going to trickle down.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to make a comment. The ladies that I play with, they are so into tennis.record.com or whatever, and it seems to me that by seeing where that says you are, you're probably a little bit more anxious to play a little bit better because you want to move up your rating. And I just don't see why it is so secret. I don't think there's as many people that want to tank and want to move up.
Yeah, no, I agree, and like I said, that's what we spend the most time dealing with, and so that's the rationale for not showing the ratings to the 100. It will continue to be a discussion, especially in the advent of these other sites. I don't know where.
Have you considered a compromise, like mid-year, a sneak peek, so to speak?
Yes, we have. Yes. We have. We've talked about that. It's coming. You know, you could discourage tennis records because they're wrong, or you can continue to encourage them because they're going to drive change. One way or the other, yes.
You said that you've already looked at the ratings, and you're already making a lot of this, but there's some, like, I think there's 3 fights that are going to go to national. Do they take Utah's record up to this next national?
We're not running the ratings until the nationals are complete, but what we do is take a look at how things are going as we go. So we're looking at them. They're not, we won't run them until after.
All right, last one.
How do you get a job at NTRP?
That's a good question.
Suicidal ideation.
Because I thought of it, and like I said, I've felt like I know as much as possible. Like every single time we talk to national